Today, we are cracking open the history books, specifically the Federal Reserve's own annual report from 1933, to understand one of the most terrifying moments in American financial history, the year the banks just stopped.
It's a fundamental question, isn't it? Our whole economic system is built on trust, this invisible glue. But what happens when that glue suddenly dissolves? Yeah, this wasn't some hypothetical scenario. It was a brutal, terrifying reality. The Great Depression was raging, and the entire banking system was teetering on the edge of a cliff.
So how did it all start? Well, it wasn't one big explosion. It was more like a series of small fires that quickly grew into this massive, uncontrollable inferno. Truly, a contagion of fear.
Just listen to the language here, from the official report, quoting the president himself. They saw this as a disease, an epidemic. That tells you everything. This wasn't just a financial problem. It was a public health crisis in their eyes, and stopping it became job number one.
And you can literally watch this virus spread. It starts small, right? February 4th, Louisiana closes some banks for just one day. 10 days later, Michigan tries a 4-day holiday. But it wasn't enough. The panic just hopped across state lines, and by the end of the month, the dominoes were falling all over the country.
And here's the crucial part, the thing that made it so unstoppable. Every time one state tried to contain the problem locally, it actually made things worse everywhere else. Michigan closes its banks. Well, now people need to pull cash from their accounts in Ohio or Indiana to pay their bills. That creates brand new bank runs in those states, setting off this vicious chain reaction that nobody could seem to control.
So, with the state-by-state approach failing spectacularly, in fact, it was making things worse, the federal government realized it had to do something completely unprecedented. It was time to hit the nation's pause button. Now, just so we're all clear, a bank holiday is not a vacation for bankers. Think of it more like the financial world's emergency brake. It's a direct government order to shut down every single bank in the country to stop the panic in its tracks.
And this was the day. By presidential proclamation, just 2 days after being inaugurated, Franklin D. Roosevelt declared a nationwide bank holiday. The entire American banking system was effectively frozen solid.
The rules were incredibly strict, but look closely at the list. Do you see the pattern? It's all about one thing: gold. The government's number one fear was that the country's entire gold reserve, the thing that backed the currency, was being sucked out of the system by hoarders. Stopping that drain was priority one.
Okay, shutting the banks down, that was the easy part. The real trick was figuring out how to reopen them without just starting the panic all over again. This whole next phase was about one thing: rebuilding public trust from absolute zero.
So how'd they pull it off? Well, the Federal Reserve's own report points to this vital element: the president's radio address. In his very first fireside chat, FDR spoke directly to the American people. He just explained the plan calmly, assuring them that only safe, sound banks would be allowed to reopen. And the plan itself was a clear, logical, three-step process. First, you only license the healthy banks. Second, you figure out an orderly way to deal with the ones that aren't going to make it. And third, you get money back into the hands of depositors from those failed banks as quickly as possible. This was no gamble. It was a carefully managed restart of the entire system.
So while all this was happening with the banks, the government was also tackling that other huge crisis, the gold hoarding. And their solution was, well, it was forceful, it was controversial, and it would change the American economy forever. The Fed's report is really blunt about this. It says heavy withdrawals of gold for hoarding were a direct cause of the national shutdown. People weren't just pulling paper money. They were pulling the actual metal that the whole system was built on. The government's response here was just breathtakingly bold. With a few strokes of a pen, they made it illegal for private citizens to hoard gold. You had to turn it in. This was a radical move that effectively ended the domestic gold standard. It put the government in total control of the nation's money supply. So once the government had all the gold, they did something incredible. They just changed its price. Look at this. The official rate for an ounce of gold went from just over $20 to a flat $35. That was a massive overnight devaluation of the US dollar, designed to fight deflation and hopefully shock the economy back to life.
So after all these drastic measures, closing every bank, recalling all the gold, devaluing the currency, the big question is, did any of it actually work? Well, the 1933 report gives us some early, pretty powerful signs that it did. The data shows some pretty immediate effects. I mean, look at this chart on publicly funded construction. At the height of the panic, it's at $91 million. By the end of that same year, it had shot up to $383 million.
That's more than a four-fold increase in government-led activity.
And here's another way to look at it. Non-residential construction went from being at just 27% of its pre-crash average all the way up to 76% in less than a year. Now, the patient wasn't totally cured, not by a long shot, but the vital signs were definitely getting stronger.
Which brings us to one last really fascinating question. After all the chaos of 1933, we created systems like FDIC insurance specifically to prevent this from ever happening again. But in our modern world of digital currencies and global finance, could it? What would a bank holiday even look like today? It's something to think about.